The Endurance Asia podcast.
And always tell a truthful story if they ever ask. Stop the complaining cause things ain't that bad.
Hey Maggie, welcome to the Endurance Asia podcast.
Hey Scott, how are you doing?
I'm very good. Good to see you in Singapore as a Hong Kong resident, coming down for the Spartan race.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, it's we've just come back from the Spartan race where you smashed it once again, getting on the podium. I'm trying to think, like, how long have you been doing Spartan for now?
Yes, I got into it in 2016, so ever since.
So it's been 3 years that you've been doing it. Yeah. So we originally met in Hong Kong probably around 2010 or so, and I'm trying to think the first race we did together. It was Outward Bound.
It was Outward Bound that we did together in a team of 4.
Were you part of Project X?
I did join rock climbing.
The rock climbing group. I think that's how I felt.
Yeah.
There's quite a few people that I've met through that group originally. But yeah, we ran Outward Bound, and I think with the first year we ran it, we won that first year, didn't we? But it's never really that competitive a race, is it? But yeah, we did the Trans Lantau together as well.
The 50K.
The 50K as a team back in, that must have been about 2011 or so.
Something around that, yeah. That was fun.
But yeah, since then, you're like a legit pro athlete now, aren't you? Well, you can pretty much say you're a professional athlete. You're certainly a sponsored athlete.
A professional athlete with a full-time job.
With a full-time job, you've got 2 professions. You're double hatting,
Exactly.
But yeah, like, so pleased to have you come on the podcast. I think that you've got like a really inspirational, transformational story for a lot of people, and also the kind of diversity of sports that you've done over the last 10 years. But yeah, like, interested to hear your initially your background. So yeah, where you're from, what brings Maggie sitting here today?
Okay, so born and raised in Switzerland, where I actually didn't do much sports before I came to Hong Kong. I came to Hong Kong around 11 years ago. Basically, all we did is snowboarding, but that's pretty much it. And then only when I came to Hong Kong, I discovered the Hong Kong trails. Somebody took me on a hike. And then... So
living in Switzerland, whereabouts in Switzerland are you from?
Zurich.
From Zurich, okay.
Yeah.
Which is like literally stone's throw from the Alps, right? So, but you wouldn't be up there in the summer hiking or trail running? Or?
No, not really.
No,
I didn't really. Snowboarding is the only sport that I did when I was living in Switzerland. People always think, oh, you must have hiked a lot. I'm like, no. Yeah. It's only something I got into it when I came to Hong Kong. And I remember.
Sorry, what year did you come to Hong Kong?
2008.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
My first hike was, that section around Sunset Peak, and I loved it. And there were people, and I suffered. Like, I didn't hike before, and then there were people in the group that were just like easily running up the steps. And so I asked them, I'm like, how come I'm dying and you're running up the steps? And they said, oh, we're trail runners, we are not hikers. And I'm like, what? You run this? And they were like, of course.
Were you coming from the Tung Chung way going straight up
Mui Bo.
Sunset? Came from Mui Bo, okay,
yeah.
okay.
And so I took a note to myself. I'm like, trail running. And then I just went by myself and I started running the trails. And then eventually I joined the Hong Kong Trail Running Meetup. That was in 2009. They had 5 or 6 members at that time. I was the only girl. And, just hung out with them and, started doing races. And then my very first trail race was a 10K somewhere in the New Territories, like max stage. Is it 9 or 10?
Around Tai Tam Reservoir.
Tai Tam Reservoir.
Yeah.
And I won. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is something I should be looking into it. I mean, obviously, I only won because it wasn't very competitive at that time. It's much more competitive now. And so I've done a few years of trail running. I've done all the King of the Hills races, like any race in Hong Kong, you name it, I've done it multiple times. And then I had a foot injury. I had a lot of running injuries.
I remember that. Yeah, you got plantar
fasciitis really badly in both feet. And at that time I didn't know the Needleman existed, so I had a million physio sessions with no improvement. I couldn't run for like 9 months. And then I discovered the Needleman, and luckily he fixed me up in like 7 weeks. But while I was,
the Needleman is a guy in Hong Kong. He's like famous in Hong Kong, right,
so
for acupuncture
exactly.
around.
So it's Alain in Mongkok, and
Chu.
he's basically he does sports acupuncture. So he's specialized on like sports injuries, especially like when you have issues with your tendons in places where your blood flow is very low, where the chances of recovery or just the time takes long.
Yeah.
So he can fix you up in no time. And so while I was getting fixed up, I started swimming and I was cycling. And then I thought, oh, well, I can run, I can swim, I can cycle. I might just do an Ironman. And I dived straight into a half Ironman. I never bothered doing the Olympic distance. So the half Ironman distance is 21K run, 90-kilometer bike, and begins with a 1.8 kilometer swim. And
what year was that? So that must have been.
So that was around 2013, 14, and I loved it. Like I loved being a triathlete. Just like sitting on your aerodynamic bike and having all the gear and like zooming at a high speed on a highway that's been closed for the race. It is amazing. So I've done about 20 half Ironman races.
Have you really? Okay.
And then, I did them through a period of 5 years.
Yeah.
And then I've done 2 full Ironman races. The first one I DNF'd.
Yeah.
It was in Malaysia. And
in Langkawi?
In Langkawi. 180. So the full Ironman distance is 3.6 kilometer swim, 180 kilometer bike, and then you run a full marathon, 42.2K at the end. So finish the swim, finish the bike. But I was just in the sun for too long. I was overheated. And then when I set out, leaving transition to do the run, I collapsed. The volunteers scooped me up, cut my race tag off, and that was it. And I was really disappointed.
What time of day was it? Do you start really early morning?
You start at 6 in the morning. Yeah.
But still, you're like hitting the run at like midday,
exactly. Right? Yeah. Anyways, so then I realized, okay, I can do a half Ironman in a super hot country, but for the full Ironman, I need to go and do it in a colder country. Yeah. So I've actually then went to Switzerland. It was nice. It was my birthday. It's my hometown. My friends were there. My parents were there. And the course was great. It was 17 degrees. And I did the full Ironman. Like, I wouldn't say easily, but like not at any point did I feel like I'm not going to make this like I did in Langkawi. And it just confirms that my body did just not like the heat very much.
Did not like the heat.
The heat in Langkawi, yeah. And and then shortly after, we went on a holiday in New Zealand. And there was an obstacle course race. So this was actually my very first obstacle course race. It was on a military training ground in Matakana, in the middle of nowhere. And so Chris is my boyfriend, we raced as a team and we won. And I'm like, we won by a lot. And we were like, obstacle course racing on a military training ground, and you get muddy and there is like, I just felt that, all the sports I did in the past has now come together. I also have to say there was a time where I did Muay Thai and CrossFit. But I actually, to be honest, I was never really good at anything I did. Obviously, not having much of a sporty background. Wasn't very good at trail running, wasn't good at CrossFit, wasn't good at Muay Thai. When I did triathlons, I was always like in the middle of the pack. So
What
But-
was your sort of best 70.3 time, or and for your form?
It was 5:45.
That's solid. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was in Taiwan. It was a very flat course. I think it was Kenting, if I remember right.
And the full one you did in Switzerland?
The full one I did in Switzerland took me a little bit longer. That took me
course, it's double
around
the distance.
14 hours.
Yeah, okay, that's solid.
Yeah. And then, but basically when I finished my first obstacle course race, I realized that this is really something I'm good at. For the first time in my life, I was actually good at something. And the only reason I was good at it is because I obviously spent years accumulating a set of useless skills. And then Spartan came to Hong Kong in 2016, launched their first race, and I won. That was a 5-kilometer distance. And then like just a few weeks after, I went to Bintan, and I did a 21-kilometer Spartan race, obviously knowing that I can do long distances. I did really well on that race as well. I came second. And then I realized I should really do more of these races, given that now I finally discovered like a sport I'm not terrible at.
I think you're doing yourself a massive disjustice. I mean, because obviously in trail running, you won a few of your early races, and I actually remember, I think it was racing the Hong Kong 50, and I remember, which is the first half of the Hong Kong Trail. I remember you being in front of me and then seeing you come back the other direction. I'm like, Maggie, what's up? And that was when you had Planta, and you were like, and actually you didn't run much for quite a while after that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where you sort of transitioned to try from there.
Yeah.
You mentioned your other half, Chris. Was he doing try at the same time as well?
He basically went through exactly the same thing. So we did all the sports we did together. So we used to do trail races. We do Moontrekker every year as a team of 2. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I wasn't able to do it in the past 2 years because it was clashing with the Spartan World Champs in the US. It was always on the same weekend, but we're going to do it this year.
Yeah, I've never done that race before actually, but everyone says it's one of the best races in Hong Kong.
You know why it's the best?
Why is it the best?
Because it's dark and you can't see where you're going. So, and then the next thing you know is you cross the finish line.
And there's beer at the end.
Exactly. Well, we won 1 year. Actually, we won a few times, and I got a few bottles of champagne.
Yeah.
So that was quite good.
Yeah, so it's pretty obvious whenever you sort of get into something, you get truly obsessive about it, right? And you just have this level of commitment where it's all in. There's no there's no half measures.
All or nothing.
Yeah. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, it's part of my personality, I guess. I've just done a Myers-Briggs test. Like I've been doing them for a couple of years. I'm an ENTJ, which is like the super alpha female extroverted personality type. And I mean, obviously with my full-time job, I'm a leader and I manage a large team. And it's like
you work in IT.
It's exactly. Yeah. If I do something, I'm going to do it properly. And like failure is not an option. So the only option is to succeed.
Yeah.
And it's just, obviously me being extremely stubborn. I would say that's it. My mom is the same as me.
Yeah. I'm actually I'm fascinated people that are like really strong athletes, and there is a real correlation with a lot of the people that we've had on the podcast and have got coming that have like really great athletes but are also brilliant in the professional world as well. There seems to be a really interesting correlation there. But so you did your first obstacle course race, and I've got to be honest, I have kind of not been anti-obstacle course races, but I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to race. Adventure racing is my favorite, and with adventure racing, you kind of want to avoid obstacles rather than go over them. And I've always been a bit like, oh no, it's a bit gimmicky, and just haven't really like understood it. But I think, and the other big thing is like the Tough Mudder is like, it's not a race. Everyone just comes in and completes it. Whilst I like the accessibility of it, bringing people into the sport, and people that have never run a 5K before, they'll sign up for a Tough Mudder, and that I like about it. But there was never a race before. But I think Spartan has definitely brought a competitive edge to it, which actually sort of makes it far more interesting.
Yeah. And it's like I would not race a race where there is nothing to win, like, because often, like, I travel pretty much every weekend to locations in Asia to compete, and sometimes I would race on Saturday, sometimes I would do 2 races on Saturday and then do another one on Sunday. But I will only enter the elite category because I'm not interested in racing when there is nothing to win, which is also the reason why I'm not a big fan of Tough Mudder. Yeah. It has to be competitive. And like when I compete, I will be entering the most competitive category because I don't want to race against people. And I'm saying this because there were races in the past that were so remote that I was standing at the starting line knowing I was going to win. Yeah. I don't like these races. So I like it when I look around and I see all my competitors, and the person who's going to win is not the fittest one because we're all the same, but the person who just has a good day on that day. Those are the best races, because then you feel, when you place, you feel like you really earned it. Yeah. When I do races where I'm walking home with a winner's trophy and I'm like, well, but I only won because I didn't have any competition, and it's not the same level of satisfaction.
Yeah, interesting. So I think you're I mean, you can only beat the field that's around you, but I do get that the competition makes you better. Yeah, it makes you train harder, and it makes you race harder. Yeah. So obstacle course racing is actually only, Spartan started in Hong Kong 2016, and actually they hadn't been going for too much before that in the States, right? What's the kind of history of that? 2013
is when it all started in the US, and it came to Asia in 2016. And so I noticed when I did triathlons and the Ironman races that I was actually competing against people who have been swimming 3 times a week for their whole life.
Yeah, like grew up in the pool.
Swimming, yeah. Exactly. So for me, no matter how hard I train, I was never able to be a pro Ironman athlete, where obstacle course racing hasn't actually been around for that long. And, everyone starts at the same time. And, I'm not competing against somebody who's been doing it for 20 years. And that's the beauty about it.
Yeah. So it started 2013. What was because there's a few races around the world that have been going for quite a long time. There's one in the UK. I forget the name of it. What's the history?
Is it the OCR?
Yeah. No, there was
race. Something.
Oh, I should have done my research beforehand. But it's it's kind of like, it has like not rat race, nuts or something. I don't know. There's one which is in the freezing cold in the UK. That's quite a big obstacle course race there. But what was where did it come from? What was Spartan the first? It was kind of Tough Mudder and Spartan started at a similar time, didn't they?
It originated in the 1920s, actually.
Right,
I'm going to tell you an interesting fact in a second. So basically, in the 1920s, everywhere across Europe, obstacle course racing was a big thing. Yeah. And then somehow,
was it for army training?
It was
or
military training.
Military training,
exactly. Yeah. And then it was very popular amongst non-military people. Yeah. And then it disappeared off the surface, and and from then until now, it was basically just used in the military. Until obviously Joe, who's the CEO of Spartan, brought it back alive again. And so my boyfriend Chris, who's also here today, so he's from the UK, and so he went back to see his dad, and they went to a museum where his family lived in Taunton somewhere, and he found that his grandpa was a professional obstacle course racer in the 20s.
Is that right?
And because he was so into it, his dad obviously did not enjoy it very much. So it almost like skipped a generation, and that explains why this gentleman over there, Chris Davis, best boyfriend in the world, is actually really good. Like, he also didn't know that, but obviously there is a talent in his family.
Yeah,
I don't know. My grandparents are dead, so I don't know what they were up to. But it's fun fact.
But it was really in the from 2013 that it became, I suppose, in the front of mind within the endurance world. And there are some phenomenal athletes that do it. Though, what do you think makes a great OCR athlete, obstacle course race athlete?
Yeah, well, so 3 components. You need to run fast. So if you're not a fast runner, you're never going to be a good OCR athlete. You have to have a very strong grip, and you have to have a strong upper body. So I did a DNA test because it was part of when I won the Hong Kong race. It was the winner's prize.
Which one did you do?
I did 2. I did one with DNA Fit and one with AGS in Hong Kong. And they gave you interesting results. So what they do is they measure your fast and your slow twitching muscle fibers.
Yeah. So they do endurance against power versus
explosive power and strength.
Yeah.
And so my DNA test came back with like increased grip strength, increased general strength, and increased endurance.
What was your power versus endurance?
It was 50-50.
It was 50-50.
Exactly,
there you go. And do you reckon that is actually kind of what you need for...
I think this is what you need. I mean, obviously, like I'm just saying, like I'm lucky with my genetics, but, that is only like 20%. 80% is the training that you're putting in. Maybe not 80%, I would say 60% is the training, and the remaining 20% is how much you sleep. Recovery is very important, and what you eat. Obviously, I'm on a 0 sugar, 0 alcohol policy, and you just have to be, you really... but I think sleep is probably the most important thing. I find there was a time when there was a period where I had more second place trophies than winner trophies, and it really pissed me off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do I need to do? What is it? It's like, what is that last little thing I haven't unlocked? So I have a PT and I have a physio, and we sat together, and they looked at my training plan and they were like, you're crazy. Like, you need to rest more, because I didn't rest. And then I went from like not resting to now resting 2 to 3 days. And I find, and it's funny, like the less you train, the better you actually get. It's a strange concept.
That's fascinating. So,
but it's difficult. I have I struggle resting because I'm an early bird. I like to get up early in the morning. I like to run up the peak and do a bunch of pull-ups at 6 in the morning. And then, the endorphin is running, and then I'm ready to go to work. If I go to work without having exercised in the morning, I'm not a...
You're a nightmare.
Not a nice manager.
I can imagine.
So, and that's why I find it really difficult to rest.
Just going back to what the 3 factors were then.
Yes.
So you mentioned sort of a genetics. Do you think, you were saying that was that
so
part
the
of it?
3 factors to be successful in obstacle course racing are grip strength, general strength, and running fast.
And running fast, And then the other things you were talking about were the sort of genetic side, nutrition and sleep. They're the other key factors. It's really interesting how sleep comes up a lot with the people that I speak with. There's actually a guy called Matthew Walker. He wrote a book called Why We Sleep, and there's been so much research done on the importance of sleep as a counteraction from Alzheimer's, for so much of your well-being is like for your weight is and so how do you make sure that you get enough sleep then? What do you do?
So I mean, it obviously helps that my boyfriend and we live together and we're on the same schedule. So we just go to bed early. Like I am.
What time?
Like I'm in bed by 9:30, and I also like.
Do you read when you go to bed, or like how
I
do
foam
you?
roll. I watch. So he reads. I watch watch TV, and I foam roll.
Yeah.
And then I go to bed. The key is to be in bed by 9:30 because then we're getting up again at like 5:30, and then we hit the gym by 6 a.m. So it's just, but also like people who know me, they know that if they want to have dinner with me, it's going to be a 6 p.m. dinner. And if it's any later than 6, then I won't go. So people who want to come and have dinner with you at 8 and then drag you out for drinks, I just would not socialize with them. So you need to, I mean,
You need to have real discipline.
you have to be very disciplined, and you just have to say no to any activity that's gonna take your evening and prevent you from going to bed early. If you catch, I mean, we travel a lot, so I'm jet lagged quite often. I travel for work a lot too.
Yeah.
So, you know, I find going for a run before I get on the plane and then going for a run when I get off the plane usually does it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Do you monitor your sleep at all? Do you have any like apps or anything you need to monitor it?
I don't monitor my sleep because I don't wear my Garmin. And
I find it uncomfortable to sleep with it.
No, I don't monitor my sleep. I sleep approximately 7 hours,
Yeah.
where I should really be sleeping 8.
8, yeah.
But then what happens is, like, when I do 3 races on the weekend, I would go to bed really early on a Sunday. I would go to bed at 8, and then I would catch like a good 9.5 hours sleep, and I would skip the gym on Monday morning, and Monday will be my rest day.
Yeah.
And I would, because I only start work at like 9, and that would give me enough time to go to bed early and just catch a really good 9.5 hours sleep.
Yeah. They do. So I've listened to a few. I really recommend it. It's a guy called Matthew Walker. He's been on Joe Rogan podcast, and there's a really. He's been on Peter Attia's Drive podcast. It was 3 podcasts. It was like 6 hours of content, but just fascinating. And he actually talks about that you can't. If you are just getting 6 to 7 hours, you can't just have a 10-hour and then that will catch up. It has to be consistent, but it's just so difficult to get that 8 hours. Like, it also says that once you wake up, you actually need to get up, because if you're just staying in bed laying awake, then it creates an environment that when you're in bed, you're just laying there awake. So you have to be focused about bed is for sleeping and not for watching shit on your phone or watching the TV.
So we have a no electronic devices policy in the bedroom.
In the bedroom, yeah.
So no TV. Like my phone is there, but it's on airplane mode.
Okay, just
but
for an alarm.
It is really just just a room with a bed.
Yeah.
And no electronic devices. I also don't look at my phone. Like I stop. And it's funny because people tend to message me late in the evening.
Yeah.
I do not check my phone after like 8:30 p.m.
Yeah.
I literally just put it away, and because I find like the screen really interrupts your sleep.
Yeah. It's been proven that it really does
exactly.
affect your
but the TV
your ability
doesn't.
to fall asleep.
Like I find that watching TV, maybe it's
not
just
as bad.
It's not as bad. Maybe it's just because it's far enough away. But what I also do is like I take supplements. So I usually take calcium and magnesium in the evening before I go to bed.
Okay.
So those two need to be taken together. And then in the morning when I wake up, I take iron and vitamin C. I take iron because I have a genetic iron deficiency, which came out in the DNA test.
Yeah.
In both tests.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, and then
what sort of iron supplement do you take?
I just buy the stuff from iHerb. The orange bottle. I forgot what name it is. Yeah. And so I find magnesium actually promotes, it just kind of like relaxes you a little bit. It like balances you out and makes it easier to fall asleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Like magnesium, potassium are obviously like
So I make myself a cocktail in the evening with calcium, magnesium, and potassium.
Okay. And vodka? Where's the vodka? You can't call it a cocktail, I suppose. You can call it a mocktail. It can't be called a cocktail if there's no alcohol.
It's a mocktail, exactly. It's a vitamin tail.
Yeah, I think... just on the nutrition side, and actually it's really interesting, the DNA Fit, that's one of the, because I've done the same one, and it's good to get an understanding of where you have the potential deficiency. For me, it's like vitamin B12 and B6.
I had that, yes. So I take a supplement for that
vegetables,
too.
but you can get some bioavailable supplements that are quite good.
Another good outcome was that vitamin. Is it vitamin E or D? I can't remember. But one of them is the one that you take from the sun.
Vitamin D, yeah.
Is it D? Yeah. So my DNA test says try to expose yourself to sun for 10 minutes a day. Yeah. And it is so true. Like when I'm outside and I'm in the sun, I'm happier.
Yeah.
I'm happier being in the sun than being in the shade.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a few factors there. It's obviously the light helps your circadian rhythm, but I think there's also like the vitamin D. So I actually do all my, unless I'm started training with the heavy pack now, but I train without a top on and just and as long as it's not over half an hour. Luckily in Singapore we've got, as you can see, there's proper cloud cover at the moment, and it's pretty much the same in Hong Kong. The sun is not quite as strong, but in Australia, unless you've got 50 on, you are like going to be burnt to a cinder. But training and exposing your skin to the sun for as long as it's not too long is actually really good for you. What else do you do on the nutrition side then? You sort of touched on that you no sugar, no alcohol. How do you do no alcohol?
Well, I just don't. I surround myself with people who do the same thing. So my time is actually very limited. Yeah. I work like 11 hours a day. I spend 2 hours in the gym in the morning, and then in the evening I exercise again. So I have very little time to spend with people. And I don't have many friends either. But the friends I do have are those who do the same thing as myself. Yeah. So nobody is interested in going out on a Friday night, because everyone I hang out with wants to get up early on a Saturday and go running. Yeah. And so I do, like, on a Saturday, so we're friends with this couple who does Spartan races, and on a Saturday I would run 25k and I would do 250 burpees and then go stuff my face and then just lie on the couch for the rest of the day. And so that couple kind of started training with us, and then their schedule has shifted. So they now get up early, eat early, go to bed early. So, there is just no time for me to spend time with people who are not on the same schedule and don't want to achieve the same things. Yeah, no, surround yourself with like-minded people, and so what do you eat? You mentioned what's your weekly? So I got a full-time helper. So we have two big dogs. They're actually very fit dogs. So because both of us are in the office all day, we hired a full-time helper just for the dogs. So she's out with them like 5-6 hours a day. But also she makes all our food. And in the morning I have my Monday to Friday food is very boring because my helper makes everything. She puts it into boxes. In the morning I get up, I take the boxes to work. I have scrambled eggs with like avocado mushroom in the morning. And then she sometimes makes burger muesli. It's like Swiss version of soaked oats with like raisins and apples. For lunch, I have a super boring pot with vegetables or a salad. That's pretty much it. And because I go to the gym every day, I take a few apples on my way out. Yeah. In the afternoon, when I feel like sugar craving, I would just eat like 3 or 4 apples. Yeah. So do you measure your macros and the volume? Because you're training so much. I'm sure you can pretty much eat till you're not hungry, right? I don't need to, because my DNA test also showed that I have a fast metabolism. Yeah.
What
So-
diet did it recommend for you? Like a
well,
Mediterranean?
it
or?
recommended. Now, here is the funny thing. I'm actually different than other people. My diet should be high. So my DNA test results said I should be eating 60% carbs, 30% protein, and 10% fat. Where
weird.
for a lot of people, the protein and the carbs is the other way around.
Yeah.
So if I went on like a paleo diet, which I did when I did CrossFit, I found that didn't work for me.
Yeah.
But I get away with.
It didn't work for you in what way?
Well, I just felt bloated
Yeah.
all the time, and I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
I was grumpy. I felt bloated and hungry at the same time.
So you too much protein?
It was
or-
too much protein and not enough carbs. And then
Yeah,
when I
interesting.
got my DNA test, I'm like, oh,
That makes sense.
now it makes
Yeah.
sense. So like once every 2 weeks, I get a carb craving, and then I will go home after work. It's usually when I have conference calls in the evening, and I would cook myself I would smash 2 massive plates of pasta, like a creamy with a white creamy sauce, and I would add scallops and shrimps.
Yeah.
And that satisfies my carb cravings. And so Monday to Friday is pretty boring. But then on the weekends, I just don't care because I will have exercised like 6 hours anyways on each day.
Yeah.
So I can literally eat whatever. And, I'm Swiss, so I obviously love cheese.
Cheese, yeah.
And
Do you actually have like a fondue thing at home?
of course, I have a fondue set. I have 2 raclette sets, and my parents visit me from Switzerland like twice a year, and they literally smuggle 5 to 6 kilos of cheese in their suitcase to Hong Kong. And since my boyfriend doesn't eat cheese, I end up eating it all.
Yeah.
And I love a good pizza. I get away with eating pasta. But it's like when I was injured and I couldn't run, my DNA test also says like I need to be doing a lot of cardio.
Yeah.
So I noticed when I had the foot injury and I did CrossFit for like about 2 years, and I didn't do much cardio exercise as part of CrossFit. And I felt like I gained weight.
Yeah.
I became a bit bulky, and then luckily what happened is the CrossFit gym in Hong Kong, they closed. And and my foot injury just recovered, and this is when I got into triathlons. And then once
Yeah.
I started running again, my weight just kind of went back to normal.
Yeah. And so back into your racing career then. So the first Spartan race that started in Hong Kong in 2016, you won the first one, and that was after you and Chris winning the one in New Zealand.
Yeah, so the Spartan race in Hong Kong was our second obstacle
That was
course
only
race
the second
ever.
one. Yeah. And then did you just immediately go, right, I'm going to go to every single race? Because you literally you're traveling every other weekend to a
Yeah.
new destination in APAC
Yeah.
and globally. So yeah, were you all in from that point?
That's exactly what we did. Yeah. Because we just realized, we're finally good at something. So let's explore a little bit more of that. And then what happened is we were like, okay, let's look at all the races in Asia. And we started flying, and we were doing really well. Then Hong Kong contacted us and asked us if we wanted to be Spartan ambassadors, which was awesome because that meant that we can race for free.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to pay the entrance fee. We just have to pay for our flights and hotels. And so, then we raced even more. And, earlier this year in January, I signed a pro contract. And
What does that mean?
basically, there is not much difference between the being an ambassador and the pro. Well, they changed the model. I think the new ambassadors who are onboarded now, they will have to pay their own entrance fees, where we at that time didn't.
Yeah.
So that's why for me there is not much change.
Yeah.
But you get like a custom shirt, and there's actually not much benefits of being a pro, to be honest.
But there are benefits of winning, right? You do. Yeah, there's a lot of
money. There is a lot of money in it.
Yeah. And so there's obviously a league, and was it 2016 that year? You have to race in a certain amount of races to qualify for the world champs.
So basically, there is serious races across all of Asia. So it will be like a series with like 4 races. And so there are approximately 20 Spartan races in Asia every year, and so there is a Southeast Asia series and a North Asia series, and so when you place in the series, you actually get a serious prize. So you don't just get cash for every race where you podium. But you also get cash for podiuming on the series. And that then qualifies you to attend the APAC Championship. And that's, again, cash if you podium. And that qualifies you to attend the World Championship, which we did in 2017 and 18.
Okay, so you've been there the last 2 years. Is it always in Tahoe?
They hosted it in different locations before, but the last 2 years were in Tahoe, and this year is going to be in Tahoe as well.
In Tahoe again. Yeah, I'm quite fascinated about DNFs, and you obviously talked about your first Ironman was a DNF, but have you had any DNFs in the OCR? You have,
of course,
not on the sprint distance though. I'm sure.
No. So I didn't DNF. I DNF'd in the World Championships in Tahoe.
In the first year?
Yeah, in 2017 as well as in 2018. So there is multiple races. So the one where I DNF'd in is the individual race that was on Saturday. And then I did well on the team race on the next day.
So is the Saturday the longer distance?
The Saturday is the longer distance, but the reason I DNF'd is because like Tahoe is a ski resort.
What time of year is it?
It was like, it's usually like early October.
Okay, so start of the winter season.
Start of the winter season. So you're at a high altitude. And, we were standing at the starting line at 6 a.m. It was 0 degrees. And then you have to run up to the top of the mountain, which is at like 3,000 meters.
Like mainly like, because they've all got their tops off all the time. I don't know whether that's just because they're all shredded to fight, or whether they actually it does. In fact, I actually did the race today, and I was thinking I should really take this t-shirt off. It's weighing me down because it gets soaking. But it must be freezing.
It was freezing. It was absolutely freezing. So 0 degrees when we started, and then the race begins with running to the very top of the mountain. So we had to run up to 3,000 meters. And when you get there, there was a lake. So one of the obstacles was jumping in an ice cold lake and swim through the lake. Obviously,
I'm shivering now in like 32 degrees Singapore just thinking about it.
And in 2017, I got DNF'd because I jumped in and I basically felt, that feeling of like when you can't breathe. And so the ambulance fished me out with hypothermia. So last year I was like, okay, I know what to expect. This time I'm going to practice. And I practiced. I would go to 7-Eleven. I would buy a bag of ice. I would put it in my bathtub and I would take an ice bath at home. And it helped because in 2018, I actually was able to swim through the lake. I came out of it.
It was the same location.
Same location. Yeah. But you're in the cold water for so long. Like the water temperature was like, it was just above the freezing point. It must have been like, 1-2 degrees.
Yeah.
And you're in the water the swim is like maybe 100 meters with a swimming vest. And with your whole shoes, you're fully dressed. You come out of the water and then the problem is your whole body cramps. And I'm like, okay, fine. All I need to do is keep moving. So I kept running. And there was a bucket carry that was on a very steep slope, obviously at a high altitude. The freezing cold wind was hitting us when you're wearing your wet clothes. And this is where I got taken out. And I basically finished the bucket carry and I kept running to the spear throw. And I was so cold, like I basically did not feel my legs from my hip downwards. Now imagine running on legs that you can't feel on the trail where it's so easy to twist the frozen
like
ankle.
a newborn giraffe.
Exactly, right, exactly. And then there was another obstacle. So you're already miserable and you're freezing and you're like, you're so far on that mountain, there is no easy way to come back down again. And you're like, can I swear?
Yeah.
You're like, fuck this shit. Anyways, and there was a dunk wall where we had to go in the water again. So I went into the water and I came out, and luckily I had an emergency blanket in my backpack. I took it out and I wrapped myself in, but I was in a really horrible state. So I continued to the spear throw, which was just like maybe 500 meters further down. And the volunteer saw me. Because I couldn't run, I was walking at that time.
Did you still have your space blanket around
Yes,
you?
and he came over to me. He's like, "Are you exiting?" I'm like, "No." He's like, he asked me like a bunch of questions, and I was shivering so badly, I just couldn't respond. And he just put his arm around me, and he's like, "I think you're done." And I was put in a cottage. That was heated, and so many people were there. It was like people, it's a world championships, you know, there were Europeans and Americans and like.
And you can only race if you have placed in a region or
Yes.
placed in a country.
Yes.
Yeah.
So obviously the people who win
Are
those
legit.
races are the Americans and the Canadians who
Yeah.
who are used to high altitudes and
Yeah.
who train in cold countries.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I'm from Switzerland, but I've been living in Hong Kong for 11 years. At
You
the sea
become
level,
acclimatized,
you
yeah.
acclimatize. So the high altitude didn't bother me when I was snowboarding as a kid, but it does bother me now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And cold, like my body just doesn't do cold. But then in return, like I do really well in races like Thailand.
Yeah.
I can literally, like, every race I did in Thailand, I did really well, where a lot of people had like suffered from heat exhaustion.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, it's you can't have it all. I bet if the Americans come to Thailand and race in the heat, they're not going to do that well either.
They need to start holding the world champs in other areas to stop giving the
What they do
the
is they say
Americans
the winning
advantage.
country gets the world champs, so it actually never leaves the US.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose, is there like a big spectator thing around it as well when they do the world champs? or-
Yes, it is.
There is?
Yeah, because it's a whole ski resort.
Yeah.
That is super occupied with there are thousands of people just on that weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I would, and on the World Champs weekends, you've got one on your individual, which is a 25k, and then they do a team race, which is 12k. Or
Exactly,
something?
yeah.
Okay, and then the team race is just by your country.
By your country, yeah.
And
in
is it
which-
mixed, or is it you do all female and then all male, or then?
Yeah, so they've been only running the team race for the past 2 years. The first year in 2017, it was mixed.
Yeah.
And then they realized we had a disadvantage because we had 2 girls and 1 guy. You're probably stronger as a team if you have 2 guys and 1 girl, just given the heavy
Yeah.
weights that you need to carry.
Do they do different weights?
No, World Champs, it's all the same weight.
Is it really?
And this is where we had a disadvantage. But then
Yeah.
the next year, they split it. So the team race was a women's and a men's team.
Yeah.
So, and this year, they haven't announced it yet.
Have you already placed into the?
Yeah, so I won the. I've already qualified for the World Champs because I won the Ultra in JB.
Ah, that's
So
right. That was the 50k one.
It was the 50k Spartan race in JB, and it took place on the 1st of December. So, and that was after the World Champs 2018. So that winning that obviously automatically gave me a spot, not just in the APAC Champs, but in the Tahoe World Champs.
Yeah, that really interests me. So we did the 5k sprint today, which is completely not my is not my distance, or but the doing a 50k distance, actually, I'm like, I wouldn't mind giving that a go at some point. But you have to do, so it's the 25k course times 2, so there's
Exactly.
60 obstacles or something.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
And so you won the one in JB last year.
Yeah.
how many burpees? How many of? Because if you don't do one of the obstacles, you don't clear it. You have to do 30 burpees.
Right, exactly.
How many? Because I can imagine on the second round doing the monkey bars and doing the hoop swing. Like, must be you just got no grip strength after 6 hours.
That's
of
exactly
being out
what
there.
happens. Yeah, because so the first loop was. The first 25k was fine. I've done it a million times. I don't think I failed any
In fact,
obstacles.
literally, how many times have you done a 25k distance?
I don't know, like maybe 20 times.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so the first half was fine, but then what happens is your grip goes.
Yeah.
Like, you can always run, you can always. Your upper body strength doesn't necessarily go away, but what really goes away is your grip. So on the second loop, I failed obstacles that I normally wouldn't fail, like monkey bars, the Z wall, which is like a rock climbing thing where you hold onto like a wall. I failed. This is the thing. Like, I did 150 burpees, but I don't remember which obstacles I failed.
Right.
Because I was so out of it.
It's hot.
It was in JB. It was really hot. Like, I literally hallucinated for the last 10 kilometers because I knew I was winning. There was nobody behind me. There were approximately 100 people who started the ultra on that day.
How many finished?
Like half of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's still not so bad. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a high DNF rate, but it's not surprising.
Yeah. And so, I just wanted to focus on going the right way.
Yeah.
And I was basically...
Was it on trails?
Yeah, it was everything. It was mud and trails. We crossed rivers. It was on
Was it
the
a good
rocks.
course,
It
or-
was on grass. It was a good course. Yeah. It was just really long. And so... Now, if you do 2 loops of the 25k, obviously on your second loop, there will be a lot of people who are in your way,
Yeah.
and you're like running and you're like going like twice or 3 times the speed and they're just there walking. And it's a bit annoying because when the trail gets a bit narrow, a lot
Yeah.
of people will be in your way. So you have to shout, excuse me, many
Yeah.
times. And my voice also disappeared.
But you did it in pretty fast time as well, right?
Yeah, like 8 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that was fast enough.
Yeah.
It was pretty flat, I have to say. There were no mountains.
Yeah. That's and they've got. I think there's one in the Philippines at the end of the year, isn't there? Another. Is it called Ultra? That distance.
So this year, Malaysia and the Philippines and Beijing are hosting an ultra.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is the one in Malaysia is a 12k race on Saturday.
Asia podcast.
And always tell a truthful story if they ever ask. Stop the complaining cause things ain't that bad.